He never imagined that a simple act, offered in the middle of a storm, could rewrite the course of his entire life. It happened on a quiet road just beyond town, where the rain fell so heavily that the sky seemed determined to wash everything away. Yet even under that relentless downpour, he noticed a lone biker struggling with a stalled motorcycle, soaked from helmet to boots. Something inside him whispered that he could not just drive past, and in that instant, he chose compassion over convenience, unaware that this decision would echo far beyond that cold, wet evening. When he stepped out his car and approached the stranded rider, there was no hesitation, only a deep sense of humanity guiding him forward. He offered help with no expectation of anything in return, no hidden agenda, no fear. Just one person reaching out to another in need. And as the two of them worked together under the pounding rain, a quiet bond formed. One built not on words, but on the rare sincerity that people can feel instantly, even in silence. What he did that night seemed small to him, almost insignificant. He drove home soaked, shivering, and thinking the entire episode was already behind him. Yet fate had a different plan, one that would unfold with a level of intensity and gratitude he could have never predicted. The next morning, as he opened his curtains, his heartbeat froze. The street outside was filled from end to end with motorcycles, more than he could count. Engines rumbling in unison, leather jackets gleaming, a sea of riders standing in absolute stillness. At first, fear crept in. Why were they here? What do they want? Had something terrible happened? But as he stepped outside, the bikers began to part, forming a path for him to walk through. And when he reached the center, he saw familiar eyes, the biker he helped the night before. This time, the man wasn't alone. He stood surrounded by over 250 riders, each holding something in their hands, boxes, bags, wrapped gifts, envelopes, and each wearing the same expression of fierce respect. In that moment, he understood. Sometimes, kindness doesn't return as a whisper. Sometimes it comes back like thunder, loud, overwhelming, and impossible to forget. And what those bikers were about to tell him would transform that rainy night encounter into one of the most unforgettable experiences of his entire existence. The moment the biker stepped forward from the crowd, the world around him seemed to slow. His boots splashed softly against the rain-soaked pavement as he approached with a mixture of pride and genuine emotion in his eyes. The man who had offered help the night before stood frozen, unsure of what to say as the rumble of dozens upon dozens of idling engines vibrated through the air. It felt surreal, like a scene pulled from a story far larger than his own life. And yet, there he was, at the center of it, with no idea what was about to unfold. The biker removed his gloves and extended his hand with deliberate respect. His voice, deep and steady, carried over the quieted murmurs of the crowd as he recounted every detail of the moment the stranger chose to stop in the rain. He spoke not as someone merely grateful, but as a man who had been profoundly moved by an act of kindness he had not expected. He explained that the gesture had reached far beyond him alone, echoing into the hearts of the entire brotherhood behind him. It was as if that single act had broken a barrier many believed impossible to cross. As he listened, the man who had helped the biker felt a mixture of humility and disbelief. He had never seen himself as a hero, merely someone who did what he hoped anyone else would do in the same situation. But hearing how deeply the gesture had resonated with these riders created an emotional weight he hadn't anticipated. Standing before them, he felt the sincerity in every word, every nod, every silent acknowledgement that compassion still meant something powerful in the world. Then came the moment that left him breathless. The biker revealed that the Brotherhood had returned not simply to express gratitude, but to honor the value of the kindness shown. One by one, riders stepped forward, setting gifts near his porch, tools, gear, handmade pieces, envelopes sealed with care. Each item symbolized something different: respect, loyalty, acknowledgement. The sight of it all was overwhelming, and the man could feel his throat tighten as he struggled to process the magnitude of what was happening. But the biker wasn't finished. He stepped aside, and the crowd parted once more. A motorcycle, polished, restored, and stunning, was rolled forward by several riders. It wasn't just any bike. It was a classic model cherished among bikers, one often handed down through generations. The biker explained that it was a gift from the entire brotherhood, a symbol of connection and gratitude that words alone could not express. In that moment, the man realized that the rain-soaked encounter from the night before had ignited something far greater than he could have ever imagined. The shock of seeing the motorcycle stopped him in his tracks. For a moment, he questioned whether he even deserved such a gesture. The bikers noticed the hesitation written on his face, and the one who had been stranded the night before approached with a reassuring smile. He reminded him that kindness often travels farther than the person who first offers it. What he had done had rippled through an entire community, and this was simply their way of showing that good deeds were never forgotten, especially among those who valued loyalty above all else. As he touched the handlebars, he felt the cold metal under his fingertips, smooth and carefully polished. It was clear that dozens of hands had worked tirelessly to prepare it. The bikers explained that they had spent the entire night restoring the motorcycle, refusing to rest until every bolt, every piece of chrome, and every detail reflected the respect they held for him. Some had brought their own tools from miles away. Others had stayed up until dawn just to ensure it was perfect. The dedication behind their work was unmistakable. The man felt an unfamiliar heaviness in his chest, an emotional weight made of gratitude, disbelief, and something even deeper. He realized that, in a world where people often rush past one another without a second thought, this brotherhood had chosen to pause everything and honor a moment of kindness. It wasn't just about the motorcycle or the gifts. It was about acknowledging the rare moments when one person chooses empathy over indifference. Moments like these reminded him that humanity still had the power to surprise. Then the conversation shifted. The biker revealed something unexpected, something that added a new layer of meaning to the night before. He explained that the breakdown had happened during one of the most difficult weeks of his life. He had been struggling, feeling disconnected from the world, and questioning the loyalty of those around him. The man's willingness to stop in the pouring rain had become a turning point, a reminder that there were still people out there who cared without wanting anything in return. It was this realization that had compelled him to gather the entire brotherhood at dawn. Hearing this, the man felt his perspective widen. He understood now that what he had done had reached deeper than he ever could have predicted. It had touched someone at a moment when the world felt small and uncertain. And standing there, surrounded by a sea of engines and leather jackets, he realized something profound. Sometimes, the smallest gestures carry the greatest impact. Sometimes, the quietest moments become the loudest echoes in someone else's life. As the morning sun began lifting the last traces of mist from the streets, the bikers invited him to sit with them for a moment. Someone brought a thermos of steaming coffee. Another offered a blanket to shield him from the cold that still lingered from the earlier rain. It was strange, almost surreal, to be suddenly surrounded by so many people who treated him not as a stranger, but as someone deeply respected. The sense of unity in the group was palpable, a silent bond that seemed to pulse through the air with every shared glance and quiet nod. He listened as the riders began sharing stories, moments in their lives when they had been judged unfairly, misunderstood simply because of the way they looked or the sound of their engines. They spoke about how loyalty had become their anchor, the one thing they could rely on when the world pushed them to the margins. It was then that he realized just how meaningful his rain-soaked gesture had been. He had offered kindness without hesitation, without bias, without knowing anything about the man he helped, and that alone had earned him their admiration. One rider, older and weathered, leaned forward and said something that struck him deeply. He explained that kindness is often loudest when it comes from someone with nothing to gain. People might forget grand gestures, but they never forget the moment someone made them feel seen in a world that often looks the other way. As he absorbed those words, he understood that this gathering wasn't just about gratitude. It was a reminder of the power of small actions and the extraordinary depth they can hold. The conversation shifted again as the bikers revealed that the rider he helped had once saved many of them in their darkest moments. To them, he wasn't just another member. He was the heart of their brotherhood, a man who had stood up for them when no one else would. Seeing him struggle on the side of the road had shaken them deeply, and when he told them how a stranger had stopped for him in the pouring rain, they saw it as a sign, a rare expression of humanity that deserved to be honored and celebrated. In that instant, The man felt a clarity he had never experienced before. He understood that compassion travels in circles, sometimes invisible, sometimes vast, sometimes returning in ways far greater than expected. This brotherhood had chosen him that morning not because he asked for recognition, but because he embodied something they believed deeply in, the truth that one act of kindness can echo farther than any of us imagine. As the morning brightened, the leader of the brotherhood invited him to take a ride with them. The request caught him off guard, stirring both excitement and hesitation. He wasn't a biker, at least not yet, but the invitation felt symbolic, an offering to be part of something greater than himself. With gentle encouragement, they helped him onto the restored motorcycle, explaining each control with patience and pride. The moment he settled into the seat, he felt a surprising sense of belonging, as if the machine itself recognized him. The roar of the engines thundered through the street as the riders prepared to move. Neighbors peeked from windows, stunned by the sight of hundreds of bikers gathered outside one small house. Yet the energy in the air wasn't intimidating. It was protective, warm, unified. When the engines fired in unison, the sound vibrated through his chest, sending a rush of adrenaline through him. The brotherhood positioned themselves around him, creating a formation that signaled respect and inclusion. They rode slowly at first, guiding him through the neighborhood with deliberate care. The motorcycles formed a moving shield on all sides, every rider watching him closely to ensure he felt safe and supported. The sense of coordination was mesmerizing, each movement perfectly synchronized, each turn almost choreographed. As he navigated the first curve, he felt something shift inside him. He wasn't just learning to ride. He was learning to trust, to lean into a moment larger than anything he had expected. The farther they rode, the more he noticed people stopping to watch. Some took out their phones, others simply stared in awe. The sight of a massive biker convoy escorting a single rider was something no one expected to witness on an ordinary morning. But to the man at the center of it all, the world around him faded, leaving only the rhythm of the engines and the profound sense of connection with the riders surrounding him. When they reached an open road beyond town, the leader signaled for the group to slow. They came to a stop near a ridge overlooking a vast landscape, the wind sweeping gently across the horizon. As the bikes settled into silence, the brotherhood gathered around him once more. The leader placed a hand on his shoulder and told him that today wasn't just about gratitude. It was about showing him the kind of world that grows from compassion. A world where strangers become allies, where simple moments spark deep bonds, and where one act of kindness can change the direction of many lives. As they stood together on that ridge, the leader invited him to walk a little farther from the group. The wind carried the distant hum of idle engines while sunlight broke softly through drifting clouds. Once they reached a quieter spot overlooking the valley, the leader began speaking with a gentleness that contrasted the intimidating exterior most people associated with bikers. He explained that their brotherhood had been built on shared hardship, loyalty, and the countless moments when they had chosen to stand beside one another instead of turning away. It was a family forged not by blood, but by choice. The leader then told him something he had not expected. He revealed that the biker he helped had once saved the life of nearly every man present. Some had been lost in despair, others abandoned by those they trusted, and others still battling burdens they carried alone. He had been the one to pull them out of darkness, offering support, guidance, and courage when the world seemed determined to crush them. To them, he wasn't just a rider. He was the backbone of their brotherhood. Seeing him stranded in the rain had struck them deeply, almost painfully. Listening to this, the man felt his heart tighten. He realized that the simple act he offered the night before, just a moment of compassion, had touched someone who had spent years giving pieces of himself to others. The leader explained that when the biker arrived at their gathering drenched and shaken but grateful for the stranger's help, the entire group knew instantly what had to be done. They wanted to return the kindness with the same intensity their brother had given to them throughout his life. The leader then turned to him with a steady gaze and said that what he had done represented something far more important than he realized. In a world where people often walk past each other without making eye contact, he had chosen to stop. He had chosen empathy over indifference, warmth over convenience. Acts like that, the leader said, are rare, and when they happen, They shine brightly like beacons that guide others back to hope. Before they walked back to the group, the leader thanked him, not only for helping their brother, but for reminding the entire brotherhood that goodness still existed in strangers. As they returned to the sea of gleaming motorcycles and waiting riders, he felt a shift inside him. He wasn't just an outsider standing among bikers anymore. He was someone they valued, someone they trusted, someone whose small moment of kindness had grown into a story none of them would ever forget. When they reached the formation again, the bikers invited him to sit around a makeshift circle they had formed near the ridge. Someone passed around bottles of water, another shared snacks they had packed for the long ride. The atmosphere felt strangely familial, nothing like the stereotypes often tied to groups of riders. It was calm, steady, built on quiet respect. And as he settled onto a patch of grass, he realized how natural it felt to be among them, as if he had known them far longer than a single morning. The biker he had helped the night before sat beside him, his posture relaxed, but his expression full of sincerity. He confessed that he had spent much of the previous day wrestling with heavy thoughts, feeling as though the world had grown colder and people more distant. When his motorcycle broke down in the rain, he felt it was just another sign that he was alone in his struggles. But when the man pulled over, stepped into the storm, and offered help without hesitation, it reignited something he feared he had lost, the belief that compassion was still alive. He listened quietly, moved by the vulnerability in the biker's voice. It was hard to imagine that someone so strong, someone who commanded the respect of hundreds, had felt worn down by life. Yet the honesty of the confession deepened the bond between them. The biker told him that the act of kindness reached far beyond a broken motorcycle. It had reminded him that even the toughest hearts sometimes need a sign that the world still holds warmth. As the conversation continued, the brotherhood shared stories of people they had met on the road. Some who had offered kindness, others who had turned away. They spoke of how the smallest gestures had shaped their journeys, how certain moments had become anchors they carried for years. It was in those exchanges that he understood something profound. The roads they traveled were not defined only by the miles beneath their wheels, but by the people who touched their lives along the way. When the engines eventually roared back to life, and the brotherhood prepared to ride again, they positioned him near the front of the formation. It was a place of honor, a sign of acceptance. And as he placed his hands on the handlebars of the motorcycle they had gifted him, he felt a surge of emotion unlike anything he had experienced before. He wasn't just riding with them. He was becoming part of their story, and they were becoming part of his. When the last mile of the ride came to an end and the engine slowly quieted, he found himself standing once again before the brotherhood, this time no longer as a stranger, but as someone forever tied to a moment that had transformed all of them. The air felt different now, lighter, as if every breath carried the weight of what they had shared. In their eyes, he saw not just gratitude, but the silent understanding that kindness creates connections stronger than any road or distance. He realized then that what began as a simple act in the rain had become a story they would all carry for the rest of their lives. As he prepared to say goodbye, the biker he had helped stepped forward, offering one final embrace. In that quiet moment, he understood the true meaning behind their unity. Loyalty born of empathy, respect forged through vulnerability, and brotherhood anchored in shared humanity. It was a reminder that even in a world that often rushes past itself, moments of genuine compassion still have the power to stop time, to shift perspectives, and to remind people of who they are at their core. Driving home later, following the path illuminated by the soft glow of the setting sun, he replayed every second of the day in his mind. He thought about how easily he could have kept driving the night before, how simple it would have been to ignore someone stranded in the storm. But one choice, one quiet decision to care, had opened a door to something far greater than he could have imagined. It revealed the truth that life often hides in plain sight, that the smallest actions can echo the loudest, and that kindness given freely always returns in unexpected ways. As he parked the gifted motorcycle inside his garage, he felt a renewed sense of purpose settle within him. The world had not suddenly changed, but he had. He now understood that compassion was more than a gesture. It was a force capable of reshaping lives, forging unlikely bonds, and reminding people that even the most ordinary moments can hold extraordinary meaning. In that realization, he found a quiet strength, the kind that stays long after the noise fades. And to everyone who hears this story, let it serve as a reminder that your actions matter far more than you think. Let it inspire you to choose kindness, to reach out when it's easier to turn away, and to be the reason someone remembers that humanity is still alive. If this message moved you, consider joining this community by subscribing, liking, and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice helps keep these stories alive, and together, we continue building a space where compassion, courage, and connection never lose their place in the world.